Let's do it.
Welcome back to the Modern Dad Show. I'm Chandra Bajwani.
I'm Carl Lyons.
And we are Modern Dads. Our episode this week is something very close to Carl's chest. Racism.
Do you have much experience with that?
I don't know if our audience knows this, but your wife is Asian, of Burmese
Asian,
origin.
yeah.
So
we're
you
a
have
mixed race family.
You have a mixed race family. So I mean, when you see Carl, you might not know that. We feel, especially in today's climate, surprisingly, that it's something that's very relevant, because sadly it's something that still exists around us.
It's certainly relevant for our kids, and I think it's connected to education, and it's connected to the conditioning process that our kids go through, and it's part of the responsibility that we've got to teach them to be as inclusive and liberal as they possibly can be in many ways.
Because no child is born racist or homophobic or a bigot in any sense.
No,
it's a part of the upbringing.
These are learned responses, right?
And it's normalized for them. And because it is around us, it is important that we raise our children to be supportive, be inclusive.
Absolutely,
be understanding, be tolerant, and hopefully stand up against anything that is bigotry.
Yeah, and I think we're fortunate, and our kids are fortunate in the sense that we live in central London. The school that they go to is very, very multicultural. I think that's one of the huge strengths of where we live and where they're educated. I think that's really, really important that they're exposed to that.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I completely disagree. When I went to a boarding school in Bristol, boarding school that was very multicultural,
right?
That's when I was exposed to it, and I didn't even know it existed. I went when I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't know being brown was a color, was a thing. I didn't know, and then it gets worse from there. It was a complete shock to me. I didn't know. I don't think my parents were even aware of it at that point.
Yeah.
They just said, it was a private school, it's a good private school, and you know, and there's a certain level of class and mindset and etiquette which was there, but then you had this underlying thing that was just almost a norm to an extent. I don't think being in a multicultural school directly excludes the fact that there might be racism or any sort of bigotry.
Yeah, no, absolutely, not per se, but I think the way that it's managed and the opportunities for exposure you've got are there, aren't they? Whereas if you're in a completely kind of isolated environment where, you know, there's just one race or one colour or whatever it is, you know, you don't have that natural exposure to that, and therefore it's, you know, you've got to manage that somehow differently. So I think the opportunities are presented, whether they're managed well or not.
Yeah, there's no point beating around the bush. You have nationalism everywhere in Europe, in America. It's like I said, it's on the rise. But how do you tackle it? What do you do if you see a homophobic family, child, parent, or a racist family, child, and you see that being either you're on the receiving end or you see another child or family on the receiving end of that? What do you do? Do you tackle it by taking yourself away from the situation and ignoring it? Do you tackle it by speaking to the family, speaking to someone above, maybe a principal? Yeah. What is the best way to tackle it?
I think my immediate response is it's a learning opportunity again. But seriously, I mean, if that occurred, you know, for my family, you know, and we experienced that, I think that we'd say, actually, other people behave like that, but our values are different, and this is the way that we see things.
Because I understand teaching your children, and obviously when my children are older, I will speak to them about the experiences I endured and I was subjected to, so that they know not to be affected by it the way I was. You can see this giant chip.
Let's just
you might hurt yourself.
Chip off the shoulder there.
This is where all my comedy comes from.
I think the schools take it really seriously, don't they? If there are any, you know, comments, any events in the school, they really do nip it in the bud. That's my experience.
Only if they're told about it.
Yeah.
Do they have a radar? Are they aware of it? Because in my school, like I said, I went through it, but I guess I never really complained to any teachers about it because
I ain't no snitch.
And it's not just racism either, is it? It's kind of you know, homophobic comments. It's you know, any form of bigotry whatsoever. I think should be nipped absolutely in the bud, because that's how conditioning you know, occurs. That's how values are formed originally, and the school's a big part of that whole process.
Globalization is the way forward, and it's natural evolution, but you're going to have an element that's surprisingly stronger than it should be, that's drawing it back. I mean, who would have thought in 2018 we'd have Nazis back. It's a reality that we live in.
Yeah, but I think they drive us to ask questions about ourselves. Where do we stand in relation to that kind of attitude? And I think that's part of the question here, isn't it? You know, so if you see that going on, that's why it's a reference point that we can either actively reject, but also be clear about who we are and where we are in relation to all of that. And I think that's an important message for our kids.
How do they tackle it when they're confronted by it? Because confrontation could potentially lead to further confrontation.
In the history of the world, nobody's changed their opinion because they got punched in the face. Because it now makes them the victim.
It boils down to ignorance and lack of education. And if someone's ignorant, can you really educate them?
Our job isn't to, you know, change the values of that family necessarily. That's up to them, based on what they see and what they experience. All that we can do, I think, is be some kind of guiding example in terms of, through our behaviour, by the way, you know, not just through our words, in terms of the role models that we would like to influence our kids through.
So I guess just best to take yourself out of the situation, and if it's in a school scenario, you let the powers that be know and let them handle it according to the policy of the school. And just make sure you put your children in a surrounding that's accepting, that's all about inclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. The younger generation coming through now are embracing the differences that they've got, you know, whether that's gender, you know, kind of identity or whatever it is. People are having that sense of confidence now about expressing who they are, and there's a lot more tolerance around that, and I think that's a really, really good thing.
In spite of the rise in nationalism where, you know, gay marriage is acceptable and people are allowed to be themselves, I think it's fantastic, and I think we need to instill that individualism, that inclusivity in our child, and say you are fine the way you are, as is everyone else.
And your differences are a real strength, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, you should build on those and really find out who you are.
Thank you for tuning in. We'd love to get your thoughts, your experiences, and please feel free to chime in.
And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think racism's just sucks, isn't it? Across the board, isn't it? Like, no matter how it comes out, it's kind of shit.
Did you have to deal with much racism during your time in India?
When I was in India, I mean, people would look at me and say, well, you're white all the way down, aren't you? That's odd.
I don't think that was racism as much as they've never seen, you know, a Caucasian man with luminescent hair.
Well,
in all of their life.
There's not many of us over here, either, to be honest.